This is Criteria.
All right, welcome back, everyone, to Criteria, the Catholic Film Podcast. My name is James Majewski, and I'm here with my co-host, Thomas Miras. Hey, how's it going, Thomas?
Hey, James. How you doing?
I'm doing better. I've been sick the past few days, so apologies to our listeners who might notice maybe a slight change in my voice. Perhaps I sound a little more sultry. But it's not just that I've been sick, but that we're recording this a bit earlier than usual. Good morning. I guess it's not morning for you though, Thomas. We'll explain why we're recording it early and why we're recording remote. You're calling in from, where are you, Thomas?
I'm in Rome, Italy. It's 3:12 in the afternoon, and I'm here for all of September. So I'm not on vacation. I'm working while I'm here, but I kind of realized, well, I can technically work from anywhere, so why don't I go live in Rome for a month? So I've been doing that. And seeing the sights and going to different churches and meeting people and stuff, but also just doing my normal work.
That's awesome. And so you wrote a piece while you were there. Do you think that like being in Rome has conduced to any like benefit for the website or for like the work that you've been doing?
Yes, it has. Not so much directly. I think it's just a general kind of, a good environment to be in. It's very, very Catholic environment in many ways, but also very not Catholic environment in many ways. And it's interesting to get a sense of I just visited, I got a little tour of the rooms of St. Philip Neri yesterday morning. And I was thinking about how he came to Rome and was like, wow, this is really crazy here, But I was here for the canonizations of Carlo Acutis and Pier Giorgio Frassati. That was pretty cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
That happened the first weekend after I got here. I'll tell you this. This is directly relevant to our podcast. So in the Vatican museums where I spent 9 hours, there's this hallway. I forget what it's called, but it's like the hallway of the candelabras or something. And there's these paintings on the ceiling. I mean, I was gratified because there's a bunch of paintings of Pope Leo XIII in there who you don't see depicted a lot, But there's also a painting of, if I can get this right, based on the Latin inscription, it's like, the profane arts being led to worship God and like being uplifted by religion or something like that. And so it's these symbols, like allegorical figures of different arts, but there's also, there's like a camera in the painting. So I don't know if it's supposed to be still photography or a cinema, but that was super interesting because this is a painting of the time of Leo XIII, who was also, I believe, the first pope to appear on film.
Wow.
And so that was quite interesting to see this like classical style painting with a camera in it, on the ceiling in the Vatican museums.
That's awesome. Yeah, very cool.
That was pretty neat. Yeah.
Now that we're talking about it, I feel like we missed an opportunity to cover an Italian film or a Roman film today.
Well, it's not too. It's not too late. I guess we could do another one before I leave.
But it is too late for this episode because today we're talking about the 1924 American silent film He Who Gets Slapped, starring Lon Chaney. And directed by Victor Sjöström, who's credited as Sjöström in this American film. Our audience may know Victor Sjöström from Wild Strawberries, right? He was the older man in the film.
Yeah, he played the main character in the Ingmar Bergman film Wild Strawberries, which we discussed because it was on the Vatican film list. And great actor, and he was. He was sort of like the previous great Swedish director before Bergman. He was the great Swedish director of the silent era. And this is one of his, I guess, early films because he came to the U.S. and started making films in Hollywood. So this is one of his early American films. And I don't know, just by the title, you hear the title, He Who Gets Slapped. And I think I'm pretty sure that's why I watched it, is because like I had seen his film The Phantom Carriage, which maybe we'll discuss some other time, another great movie made in Sweden. And He Who Gets Slapped is just such an intriguing title. What could that possibly be about? You know? And it turns out it's the first creepy clown movie, from what I understand.
Yes. Now, not the first like creepy clown, because I very much see this character played by Lon Chaney. Lon Chaney, of course, is a very famous actor from the silent era, but also makeup artist. And so presumably, this sort of just came with the territory when working with him, is that he would do his and design his own makeup. The makeup in this film, he plays a clown, is amazing, but people may know him for his very famous, iconic depiction of the Phantom in The Phantom of the Opera. So that's Lon Chaney, incredibly prolific actor from this era. But he plays a Paul Beaumont, who is a scientist. He's under the patronage of a Baron Regnard, played by Mark McDermott. And he's betrayed by this man who steals his research, steals his wife, and after this traumatic experience of having the Academy basically laugh at him.
Because he gets slapped by the Baron.
He protests that the Baron has stolen his research, and the Baron slaps him, and the Academy laughs at him. And so he takes this trauma, this despair that he feels, and he becomes a clown. He joins a circus, and his shtick, is that he just stands there and gets slapped repeatedly, like upwards of 100 times, and people just crack up. I mean, it's slapstick humor, literally, but it's somehow darkly perverse because he's playing out.
Because he always smiles. He just gets back up and keeps smiling. That's like the creepy thing about it.
Yes, and in his act, there's like an audience of like 60 clowns who are watching him and just laughing at him, and he looks towards them and he sees the faces of the Academy, the doctors in their chairs and their beards laughing at him. I'm
laughing because it's such an insane concept for a film. Like it's such a weird concept.
So it is like an early psychological thriller because even though there is a romance story that's sort of baked into this, two other younger circus performers falling in love, and the kind of drama surrounding their story. Really, it's against the backdrop of this man who's been spurned, and has kind of, in some, significant way, cracked. And there's something so disturbing, so unsettling about this, clown in full circus makeup, smiling and smiling and smiling when we know that it's covering up this tremendous amount of pain. So, one thinks about, for instance, the Joker, from the Batman series. That, I think, is like a very obvious comparison. But this figure of the sad clown predates this film, and is actually, I think, traceable back to, this is maybe the Roman connection, Commedia dell'arte, the character, the archetype of Pierrot, who is sad for the spurned love of Columbina. So there is something kind of archetypal, and referencing this tradition in this figure of Paul Beaumont, who becomes He Who Gets Slapped. That's his stage name, He. And then for the rest of the film, he's referred to as He. But it's a fascinating film. It's very watchable, very accessible. Some films from this period maybe are a little, like, the pacing is a little slow, or there's something that's kind of like hard for a modern audience to hook onto. But this one, really, it's very snappy. A lot of amazing imagery, and there's something about this figure of the sad clown. There's something about this theme, this darkly comic theme, that still feels very, very fresh. Like I don't know exactly what it is, but it seems like it still is very relevant to a contemporary audience. I don't know what you think about that, Thomas.
Yeah, well, I don't know a ton about the pre-cinema theatrical tradition of the sad clown, but there's also like, yeah, Pierrot. I think of the Schoenberg's famous classical song cycle, Pierrot Lunaire, which is like really creepy. It's like atonal, creepy music about this clown, and it's just sort of like it's just the lyrics are dark and creepy, and the vocal stylings are really bizarre, and there's a lot going into it, and it also makes me think of. I mean, you mentioned Phantom of the Opera. Something about it made me think of the Phantom of the Opera in terms of his. You know, he's like this weird clown, and he falls in love with this beautiful young circus girl, horse bareback riding person. And also, I don't know. I don't know if it's a horror movie per se. You called it a psychological thriller, which I think is good. But I think like the story of when you think of it in terms of like horror or like ghost stories, I think there's something to it because I think it's also kind of a revenge film in a way. But I think that the best way to read it, because like this character is obviously like very disturbed. This isn't like an average Joe who, is getting revenge and he's like completely relatable. Like he is relatable, but he's also become like a freak, and so
right.
like that's
right.
yeah.
There's a sense in which this is a monster film.
Right, exactly.
And I'm thinking about like Frankenstein or
because Frankenstein is also misunderstood and persecuted and, all of that, and turns on humanity.
Yeah, Lon Chaney plays Quasimodo in a film adaptation of The Hunchback of Notre Dame. There's a lot of comparisons there as well. Because one part of the plot that you alluded to, Thomas, that I didn't explain fully, is that after he's been, left by his wife and is alone in the circus, he does end up falling in love again with this young woman who joins the circus as a bareback rider. And there's another man, a young man, who also is a bareback rider, riding these horses without a saddle, doing various tricks. And the two of them fall in love. And so there's a kind of love triangle that emerges, but it doesn't really create any conflict among them because this woman's greedy father, who has basically, kind of squandered an estate that he's inherited. He's sort of the lesser man of more storied ancestors. He arranges to marry his daughter off to none other than the Baron who had betrayed Beaumont early in the film. And this Baron is very wealthy, very famous. And so this is something that's born purely of the greed of the father.
The lust of the Baron, who like has to be convinced to even marry this low-class girl just because of her think what a bride she will make. Like purely lust.
Yes, well, I mean, because significantly, he then sends Beaumont's wife away. This woman that he stole from Beaumont, he basically discards her. So before there can be any tension within this love triangle of the two young circus performers and the clown, there is this sort of common enemy in the Baron. And so when Beaumont recognizes the Baron and sees what's going on, he kind of, in a almost Quasimodo-like fashion, chooses to kind of protect his love. And even though he doesn't get the girl in the end, sort of like Quasimodo, he sort of uses his love for her to basically get back at the Baron and protect her from entering into this terrible marriage. So you're right. It's a revenge film. And typically we would probably feel a little more problematic about that, because I mean, there's something very problematic about this genre of revenge film where the audience is basically just made to feel like identifying with the person who's getting their revenge and yeah, beat the bad guy. But I think it's softened by a couple of things. One you already mentioned, which is that this character, we even though we do identify with him, we recognize that there's something very off. That something wrong something has gone wrong, and so we can see him with a little more distance and a little bit more like a monster. But then two, there's sort of some deniability, because he is defending this woman, her honor, and the young love that is blossoming between these two younger performers, right? Yeah.
I noticed that he takes part in their act as well, because it's like a circus, and so different people from different parts of the circus sort of work together on different acts, and his part in their act is literally like following them around as they ride on this horse and like trying to get up on the horse with them and failing and just getting dragged around. So it's like very symbolic, like this beautiful young people, and he's like trying to get up with them and he can't,
Totally. And there is one crucial scene where he confesses his love to her. He's in full makeup, they're getting ready to go out to perform.
He tries to warn her too. He's just to warn her about what's going to happen.
Right. And her response, at first she's kind of taken aback, but then she begins to laugh, and then she slaps him, kind of like playfully, but she can't take him seriously. She says, "Oh, for a moment there, I thought you were serious." And so instead of this souring him and making him say, embittered against her, it really sort of just solidifies for him that he can't be for her what this other man can be, and that his love is going to have to be expressed somehow differently, So I think that there's some complicating elements in the plot that make it a little more three-dimensional than just a pure revenge thriller, so that when he does, spoiler alert, when he does get his revenge, it's a little different, and it's also quite tragic. So
speaking of Rome, I don't know if you guys can hear that there's a person practicing opera singing in my apartment right now in the background.
Oh, awesome.
But the scene you just mentioned is touching. His response, it doesn't turn him into like, now I'm going to kill you too. Right. He says he sort of reacts and pretends to laugh along with her, and then he says, "You forget, Consuelo, I am never serious. I am he who gets slapped. I say serious things and people laugh at me." It's like, oh man, that's really sad. But you also see him like, all right, I must decrease and like,
yeah. So, there's this interesting, plot that's unfolding with all these characters and all centered around the very compelling figure of this kind of demented clown. But there's also, strangely, this kind of universalizing theme that Victor Sjöström returns to throughout, where he kind of waxes poetic at moments about life and love and death, and why is it that what does it say about man that his impulse is to laugh upon seeing like another be slapped mentally, spiritually, or even physically? And we return throughout the film to this image of a clown spinning a globe. Whether it's Beaumont or not, I'm not entirely sure. It may very well be, but in any case, he's spinning. Well, it's not a globe. At the beginning, it's a ball, but then through this kind of amazing crossfade, it's a crossfade to Beaumont spinning the globe in his studies or laboratory at the beginning of the film. But we get this image repeated, and then we also have another image of a sort of gaggle of clowns dancing, arranging themselves around a globe. And it's the last image of the film. So there's something kind of larger, more cosmic, more universal that Victor Sjöström seems to be interested in this story, universalizing its themes beyond just the sort of tragic story of Paul Beaumont. And the fact that he's using such an archetypal figure as the clown, I think helps,
By the way, I think it's very true to life. Yeah, I've heard some comedians talk about like humor as a defense mechanism and like having to deal with stuff growing up, whether it be bullying or whatever. And either like that could take the form of like using humor to sort of get back at someone, to like zing someone back, or it could take the form of like self-deprecating, which like I remember I didn't like admit that I was bullied as a child until I was like in my like late 20s, because like first of all it didn't mostly take like a physical form, but like my way of coping was to sort of like just like self-deprecate and like laugh, get in on the joke, you know what I mean? And so like I sort of relate with the character on that level, in that he's sort of like reenacting the trauma in his act. I mean, it's also like totally psychotic, but like
Yes.
But you can see why this could be described as like a very psychological film. And I think that maybe is part of what gives it such a contemporary feel, is that there's like a degree of psychological realism in this film that is very, commonplace in our stories today. And I think that this figure of, he's almost a kind of anti-hero, he's the dark, complicated protagonist that we're also very familiar with in film and television today.
Right. Well, I mean, it's also true, like, we live in this time where like people who have been publicly humiliated can then like go and become these weird like weird kind of like wild card public figures, and sort of like
totally.
just like build this whole revenge against the system that took them down, with like cancel culture and whatever else, So yeah, it's very interesting, and like the effect that this humiliation have. It also made me think also of like strangely of the holy face devotion, because that's focused specifically on like the face of Jesus, like in his humiliation.
Wow.
There's this in the Revelations to Sister Marie of Saint Pierre. Jesus taught her the relationship between a person's face and his name. It's also connected to the devotion to the holy name, and so like this idea that like when somebody's name is mocked, you see the like the confusion and the like the confusion and the shame and the humiliation on their face. But when they're like praised,
Wow.
and when they're praised and built up, then like their face like brightens and becomes like joyful again. And
Wow. What an awesome insight. I mean, and I think it's so telling that his response to his shame and humiliation is not just to efface himself with makeup, but to remove his name. He becomes simply he. He doesn't even get a stage name. He's just totally anonymized, totally flattened. His identity is gone.
Well, I for me, definitely the Lon Chaney performance is like the key part of this film.
Yes.
And his face is very expressive with or without makeup. Like without the makeup, he's still there's scenes where I think of the scene where I guess he only partly has his makeup on in this scene, but it's the first real interaction between him and the young woman when she's like sewing his like fake heart back onto his costume, and like the sort of like tenderness with which he looks down
Yes.
on her is very moving.
His performance is amazing, because he's not just capable of these moments of like intense grotesqueness, and real kind of horror or yeah, the grotesque is probably the best way to put it. But also he can be equally as expressive in, like you've mentioned, these very tender moments or very dramatic moments,
and a certain nobility of expression at certain moments, I think.
Yes, yeah, and it's not just in his face, but it's in his whole body. When at the beginning of the film, when we see them presenting the research before the academy, and the Baron is up there claiming everything for himself, and it cuts to Beaumont there. He's sort of behind a desk, and just the expression of shock and betrayal and almost like disbelief, coupled with his posture behind this desk, like almost like he's ready to just leap out from behind it, or he can't believe what he's hearing. This is an actor who clearly understood the expressivity of not just his face, but of his whole body. And
by the way, both of his parents were deaf. I just learned this today. Both of his parents were deaf.
Wow.
So he got like very facility with sign language and like gestural communication, which is perfect for a silent film actor, obviously.
Yes. Well, this film, another reason why people might want to watch this film is because it's such a good example of so many things that the silent film really hones and sort of focuses in on. So aside from Lon Chaney's performance, which again, is very different from the performances that you might come to, just be more familiar with and more expect more from contemporary film. I'll say, yes, it's more theatrical in some respects, but it's also very much film acting as well, because it's recognizing the power of what's in the frame. But beyond just the performance, the direction, and the imagery is really, I think that was like what I was noticing the most of. Victor Sjöström, he's an early film director, but he's using a lot of techniques, cinematic techniques. I already mentioned that crossfade that happens at the very beginning of the film between the clown spinning the ball and Beaumont spinning the globe. But there's a lot of other interesting cuts and edits when Beaumont is first realizing that not only has the Baron stolen his research, but also stolen the love of his wife. There's this amazing moment where he starts to laugh, but then it cuts. It's like very choppy. It cuts to him being kind of just more just in amazement or sort of straight shock that we would expect from the moment. So it's like this interesting experimental moment where we see the clown beginning to emerge, but then it cuts back to, and so there's all sorts of examples like this, but even more fundamentally, I think there's a great appreciation for imagery and the power of imagery. I mean, obviously, I think that this is a bit of a truism when it comes to silent film, because you have to show and not tell. There's a lot that just the form forces the director and the performers to do, but that can be very it's a limitation that can produce a lot of really nice imagery that you wouldn't necessarily get otherwise. And so I think that this film is a perfect example of that, of just excellent imagery, unsettling imagery, even like surrealist imagery. So yeah, I think there's a lot to appreciate about this film, even on just a visual level. It reminds you that film really is a visual medium. Every once in a while, you kind of need to be reminded of this, because there's so much going on in a film, and oftentimes the sort of literary or thematic narrative elements predominate. But it helps every once in a while to see a film like this and just be reminded, oh yeah, this is a visual medium. And that's where it's reaching me. And I think that probably if I were a film director, I would I would think that every film director would want to sort of try their hand with this form of the silent film, just to, learn what's possible without telling people things, without the spoken word,
Right. Yeah. By the way, this was also the first film fully produced by MGM, and the first film to use the MGM lion as the mascot at the beginning of the film, which is appropriate because this film features a lion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool factoid. There's a lot of different versions of the film. So, of course, it's in the public domain because this film, what did I say, 1924? So you can find this film on YouTube, but there's going to be like a wide range of different versions.
Yeah, so we've talked about this before. I think we did when we did the Passion of Joan of Arc, how one issue in like bringing silent films back into circulation was not knowing the proper speed. So people have this impression that silent films are fast, but it's often because they were played at the wrong frame rate, because they were shot at varying frame rates, because these hand-cranked cameras and also hand-cranked projectors in cinemas too. So this one was originally shot at 18 frames per second, and according to, I think Wikipedia said, the proper running time is 95 minutes. It's hard to find a good 95-minute version. There's one on YouTube, but I think it's a video of like a live showing of it, and it's kind of jerky, and the soundtrack is like this bad improvised soundtrack, so I don't recommend that one. So my preferred one, which I'm going to link to in the show notes for people to watch, is 71 minutes, so it's a bit sped up. I think it's like 24 frames per second. But it's got a soundtrack. It's a decent quality, and it's got a quirky score that I happen to like. There's also a version that's like 83 minutes. That's a little slower if you want to sort of take in the acting a little bit at a slower pace and stuff. But it's also a little bit jerky. Sometimes the quality isn't great, and the soundtrack isn't as interesting, in my opinion. Also, that one is frequently interrupted by ads, so I would just honestly wouldn't recommend it for that reason alone. But yeah. The one I'll link to is the one I would recommend. I think it's always refreshing to go back to a good silent film and sort of see a different version of what cinema can be. And like you said, this is one of the more engaging, more easily watchable silent films that I've seen. There's other ones that I certainly want to do at some point. I think we've got at least 3 or 4 probably, on the docket to do over time.
Yeah, and we'll definitely do Phantom Carriage at some point.
It's it's just good to, I don't know, when we were doing the Vatican film list, I was sort of gratified to find that I got to the point with a few silent films on there that I developed a taste for it, not to watch them all the time, but that like once a year or so, I'll be like, man, I really want to see a silent film, because it's just it really is just a very different kind of experience with a movie.
Totally. Yeah. And I think that if people maybe don't have that taste yet, this is a really good film to help begin to cultivate that for a lot of the reasons that we've already mentioned.
I believe this is the only Lon Chaney film I've seen, so I would certainly like to see more from him. Check out more.
Yeah, I remember watching Phantom of the Opera, when I was a kid, many years ago. So maybe that's one that we should check out. We've looked at silent horror films before, notably with Nosferatu. So that might be a good one.
All right, everybody. Well, this podcast is produced by CatholicCulture.org. Please go to CatholicCulture.org/newsletter if you'd like to check out our written material and our news and all that stuff. And we will see you with our next episode soon enough. God bless you. See you next time.
Criteria is a production of CatholicCulture.org. Check out our other podcasts, including Way of the Fathers, an early church history podcast hosted by Jim Papandrea, Catholic Culture audiobooks bringing to life classic Catholic writings, and the Catholic Culture Podcast, an interview show exploring Catholic arts, culture, and issues. You'll find all of this, as well as Catholic news, commentary, liturgical resources, and much more at CatholicCulture.org.